I've titled the talk today, The Eternal Perspective. The Eternal Perspective. And I want to start with a story. One day, the father of a very wealthy family took his son on a trip in the country with the express purpose of showing him how poor people live. Okay? They spent a couple days and nights on the farm of what would be considered a very poor family. And on their return trip, the father asked his son, "How was the trip?" The son said, "It was great, Dad." "Did you see how the poor people live?" the father asked. "Oh yeah," said the son. "So tell me, what did you learn from the trip?" The son answered, "I saw that we have one dog and they had 4. We have a pool that reaches to the middle of our garden and they have a creek that has no end. We have imported lanterns in our garden and they have the stars at night. Our patio reaches to the front yard and they have the whole horizon. We have a small piece of land to live on and they have fields that go beyond our sight. We have servants who serve us, but they serve others. We buy our food, but they grow theirs. We have walls around our property to protect us. They have friends to protect them." The father was speechless. And then his son added, "Thank you, Dad, for showing me how poor we are."
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Isn't perspective a wonderful thing? There's nothing like a child to just see through everything to the truth. Makes you wonder what would happen if we all gave thanks for everything we have instead of worrying about what we don't have. That'd be great, wouldn't it? You know, our perspective really does matter. And I'm defining perspective this morning as the way you and I see or perceive something. Recent behavioral science studies have shown what Anais Nin said, which is that we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are, and how we're affected by whatever is going on. In other words, we make interpretations according to our beliefs and past experiences about ourselves and others. And we give meanings to things in the context of the circumstances we live or find ourselves in. I mean, say for instance, if you think that toys corrupt children's mind, then from your perspective, your point of view, a toy store is an evil place, right? That would logically follow. I get someone, oh no, okay. Depending on where we stand, the view of this sanctuary and the things in it can look very different to each one of us because they can represent different things from our past that we bring here. It has nothing to do with what's actually here. And it's like our perception of the physical world. Perspective matters in our subjective experience of the social world also. I love stories. Jesus used a lot of parables. Once upon a time there lived a lobster. At the bottom of the sea, he was so protected by the shell that God designed for him that a full-grown man could stand on the lobster in the water and it wouldn't harm him. Okay? But this shell protects the lobster also confines the lobster. It can't grow past the size of its stationary shell. In order for the lobster to grow, it must shed its protection. And underneath, there's just a thin pink membrane skin, the consistency of wet tissue paper. Now the lobster has a choice to either to stay protected and forever remain the same, or be willing to risk everything to grow. And most of the time, the lobster will choose growth, even if it's risky and causes his life to be shaky for a period of time. And you and I have the choice, and we must choose growth, spiritual growth. Growth can happen when we choose to view view life from a higher perspective than just a judgmental and critical mind. Some of you may remember, I grew up in the 50s and watched a lot of TV, and what I watched stuck with me. You know, I remember those black and white shows. Some of you remember that on that little screen, you know, and they seemed so simple, sweet, and idyllic. And to my memory, no matter what was going on, it all happened quickly, within a half an hour, okay? And there was always a happy ending. I see some faces here, yeah. Now, I'm not sure what happened to me as a young child, but I think maybe that kind of subtly, unconsciously conditioned me to think that life was really supposed to be like, what, Ozzie and Aaron, or Father Knows Best, or Leave It to Beaver. I thought life was supposed to be really easy. I mean, it was supposed to be. And that I would never have any, you know, bad conflicts come into my life. And I tend to think that's one of the reasons why Christianity appealed to me in the early years was because I thought, you know, in church with God, this would be true, that life is easy, that life is good, God is good, and there could be nothing but a kind of rosiness to my life. As you all know, I'm sure I rather quickly learned that this wasn't exactly true. As really challenging things kept taking place, I couldn't quite figure out whether it was me who was failing to understand the truth ideas that I was being taught in my fundamental church, or maybe I was misapplying these ideas somehow. You know, we blame ourselves. All I knew was that in my life, really challenging things were taking place. No matter what I did, what or how much I prayed, these things continued to happen. What was I doing wrong? You ever felt that way? You're coming to church in here on this kind of a nice but cool day, probably reading your Bible, you're listening to a talk, and you think, well, why is my life not working? I'm sure you have. Well, it took a wee bit of testing, a lot of contemplation, a lot of prayer, a lot of guidance, and asking around in church. And a lot of going out into the world and just talking to people and observing people. It took all my life and my seeking to help me understand that I was not, and you are not, misapplying the biblical principles, and that actually things are just perfect the way they are. Now that's a puzzle, isn't it? I thought, excuse me, I don't know that I want to hear all this. I came across this quote by Charles Weston, W-E-S-T-O-N, that sums up what I'm trying to say. And he writes, I pray to God when the foundations of my life are being shaken, only to find that it was God who was shaking them. And I thought, oh man, even God's against me. Okay? These are things you think about. So, maybe the good that you and I want so much to come to us only comes when we're shaken up a bit, when we're redirected, when some of our old, outgrown, outworn, no longer useful and crusty beliefs are broken open so that some light can shine through and the good can come in. Could that be true?
Yeah.
Okay. At the time, I didn't think so. I have my moments now. Okay? You never just arrive and it's done. No. It's a constant evolution. You see, there's a part of me, and I suspect a part of you, that still holds the world and ourselves that way, that if I just do this, if I just read the Bible, if I just pray, if I just meditate, if I just work in the church, it's going to work out, right? And that the world will be easy, and life will be easy, and that spiritual truth is supposed to come easily. I'm just going to get these revelations. I do get them, as we all do, but not all the time. And especially if you're a Christian in the way that I came up, and you just believe in Jesus Christ, leave it to Him to do everything, and you pray and you go to church, and when it doesn't work out the way way that you think would be good, that you're doing something wrong. It's you. Ever felt that way? I know you do, or have. To help us understand this process, just imagine what a caterpillar might feel like if it were crawling across just say a Persian rug. A little tiny caterpillar crawling across the Persian rug. From its point of view, its perspective, crawling across that rug, it must encounter a lot of strange things. Use your minds now to imagine this. It probably would make no sense with colors changing right and left. It would seem just like a mishmash of colors and feelings, just like life can sometimes appear to us. But then one day, when that caterpillar becomes a butterfly, it can fly over that very same rug, and it's going to see something else. It will be able to see the patterns of colors in that rug, and it will all come together and make sense. It will see that there really was a design in the mishmash. You see where I'm going this morning? That's why it's so important for you and I to have a spiritual vision for our life. That higher perspective, that eternal perspective that does not change with the changing circumstances. The higher point of view, like that mountaintop peak experience in the meditation that I alluded to. And to look at our life with some higher perspective. It's not just what you see here, but what I see here. To look beyond the appearances, you can do that with your higher perspective. And see the eternal underlying design or pattern. You know, we're not even breathing ourselves. You ever think about that? Something's breathing you. You know, you're not sitting there thinking, oh, I gotta go in and out. Something's breathing you. There's something bigger, as the song goes, than you and I. I believe that there's always a design or pattern in whatever chaos and madness of our lives. And that everything does happen for the best. Now, before you stone me, and I also don't know of a more beautiful and more challenging idea in all of God's truth in our Holy Bible than that. That's what we're asked to embrace. On one hand, it tells us that God is so good and this world is so beautiful that there's great bliss right here, right now. And on the other hand, we're confronted with our own experience, which is sometimes happy and sometimes not so happy. Are you getting the play? Now, there are plenty of times we don't particularly see the point of the noise that's going on next door at our neighbor's house, maybe. Or in the challenges that take place in works and the politics, oh my God, of what goes on. We don't particularly see the joy of the truth in it, and something rises up within us and says, what's going on here? Have you ever felt like that? I know you have. And then thought, how could it be true that everything happens for the best? I'm working with this, you can tell from the way I'm presenting. First of all, in understanding that everything happens for the best, it doesn't mean that we have no responsibility to change anything. It doesn't mean that at all. That's the lazy way out. I mean, if we believe here in Unity, God is good, God is everywhere present, and there's only God's good and presence in my life, and everything happened for the best, well, why should we change anything? Everything is perfect the way it is, right? Take the affirmations and things that we say, and do you really believe it? But if you and I have a real natural desire to see something change, this is just as much a part of the natural world as a tree growing, doing what it does, or a butterfly, or a mountain. Our natural desire to make a difference in the world is part of God's design and plan also. And we need to have that expressed through us. I was thinking of musicians and things that you want to do. That's part of the divine plan. So the desire to change things, if kept in balance, is a part of God's plan, a part of God's will, and it needs to be expressed. In fact, when we don't express that very desire or need that we have inside, we grow complacent and lazy. We sit back on our haunches and let other people take care of us or run the world or just do. We're just gonna try to get through this. We become actually less than human beings, and we're far from expressing our human, much less our divine potential that Jesus told us about. The things I do, you can do. Excuse me? And greater. What do you believe this morning? This is a challenge. I'm working with these things too, so. And we do have a responsibility to change the world, to try to change the world. It's a part of who we are. But again, it has to come in balance. And frequently we find out that the world resists our change. Have you seen this? I have. They don't like because you've changed. You don't do things the way you used to. The relationship has changed. And to some extent, we probably do have that reaction where we sort of resent it. Because after all, we're out here trying. They're going to be talking about me. Okay? But do we stay in that feeling? Some people do. If and when we do, again, we're resisting the natural will of God because we have this perspective of the way things should go or that we want them to go. And they're not going that way. So we're perturbed. Part of that dynamic tension, that balance between trying to make a difference in the world and accepting the world as it is, appears to be two different forces. But in trying to make a difference and accepting things the way they are, in that very balance is the purpose of our lives. Yeah. The world needs us. And we need the world just the way that it is. For this we have come. And it's not easy to hold this. I know, I'm here with you on the planet. But it's very, very essential in our spiritual experience. In his book, Illusions, Richard Bach wrote, "The mark of your ignorance is the depth of your belief in injustice and tragedy. What the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly. It's just when we think it's all over that it's really beginning." End of quote. There's incredible spiritual growth in this world, and it's happening in your and my life. And there's not a person here who's not experiencing or have experienced stress and strain in their lives. Are you seeing it? What are you calling it? What is your attitude about it? Are you saying, am I doing something wrong? Again, in the 50s sitcom world, I secretly longed to live in it. You know, that's a good escapism. They've got a channel called Decades now where you can just go and watch those old sitcoms. And you know, in those sitcoms, there was no bugs or insects. You notice that they were on a picnic. I mean, everything was healthy. Nobody was slapping their face and everything. And so I thought about, I don't know why God created mosquitoes, for instance, okay? I dislike summer bugs. You try to enjoy them going around you. And I would like for them to just go away or do away with it entirely with insecticides or something, okay? Now, this is the simplistic part of me speaking. Gardeners out there know that those bugs eat away at the flowers in your garden, or if you have a vegetable garden, they eat away at the vegetables and the leaves. It's like they are pests. We call them pests, but they all have a place in the ecology of the world. They do. In other words, there's a balance in this world, and a balance to the ecology of this world. It's really the divine expression of God at work that we, in our human ignorance, like to call a mistake or a nuisance. But we need to honor the deeper perspective and look beyond the appearances. There is a higher view. And the takeaway from today's lesson, I hope for you, is that whatever experience you or I are presently having, to think of it as the best thing that could happen to us right now. That's hard to do. Think of it as God's will being done for you. This is exactly what you need and I need to clear out whatever is in our way, to really cleanse our being of whatever has us bottled up, to haul out the old garbage and make room for the new. Jesus spoke quite powerfully on this subject. Maybe you might not have recognized it as such. It took me a while to think about it, but he did say, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you, and pray for those who spitefully use you. Now, I ask you, who would really want to do that? Do you really want to bless your enemies? Oh, sure, you bless your friends, but your enemies? Pray for those who spitefully use you? Thinking of our politicians now. What's this all about? Is this some goody-goody teaching that's beyond you and me? What was Jesus talking about? Well, I think he is telling us that when our enemies come to mind, and I'm not talking about just people, but circumstances, situations in our lives that are challenging us right now, up front in our faces, and that feel like enemies, to see them as blessings. This is a whole different view, because they'll reveal things about ourselves that our friends would never tell us. You know, you got a good friend and they're pumping you up, and then somebody comes along and says something, and you know there's a ring of truth to it, and you need to hear it. Hardships and obstacles and even pain and suffering can serve us if we let them. And for thousands of years, the world's religions have honored poverty. And for some reason, it's difficult for us to understand, maybe for me to understand, you know. We in modern Christianity have taken a new slant on the subject, and rightfully so. There's nothing particularly saintly about being poor in and of itself. And there's certainly nothing sinful about being rich, not in and of itself. But there is an underlying truth. We all know from experience that when life is going just the way we want it, we tend to get lazy in our spiritual practice. It's not at the forefront anymore. And when life is tough and hard, we tend to be more aware of the simple blessings. We say, thank you, God, for this. Being grateful for the bowl of soup you had for lunch. And there's something about that gratitude and being willing to give that gratitude that blesses us and makes life fill up. You get that feel in your heart. You got nothing, but you can feel it. People who have everything they need have the tendency to not feel grateful, but to want even more. Would you agree? Yeah. But this is in us, our perspective, and how we see it. It's that struggle between greed and gratitude. differences occur. So it becomes very important how we respond to life in the moment. Two ways. We can cry or we can sing. The choice is up to us. We must change the prescription of our spiritual eyeglasses. Our job is not to set things right, as Eric Butterworth says, but to see things right. Total turnaround. And what a responsibility. I'm not saying any of this is easy. These are just questions. A whole lot lies in this tension, this balance. And so on this Veterans Day and into the coming week, think about these things and contemplate your life just the way it is. And could it really be true that everything does happen for the best? Let us pray.